Two nails, one design. One's easy breezy, the other's for a nail art pro. So for our first design, I've already polished our nail using our Aquamarine 101, and I've got 2 coats of that on. Now, at this point, you have a choice whether you want to work on a shiny surface like I have already, or a matte finish surface. Now, the shiny surface that we have is the tacky surface from our cured gel polish. But I actually prefer to work on a matte surface. It is a personal preference. If you want your flower petals to flow just a little bit more, you can work over that tacky surface. I do like the finish of the matte non-tack top coat because I feel like I get a crisper flower design. So I'm going to put 1 coat of our matte finish top coat on. We're going to cure that fully for 60 seconds. So our nail is cured out and we have that matte finish on there. Again, you could work on that tacky surface, whichever choice you want to make, but we're going to use our Mission Control gel paints and we're going to create a really pretty dot daisy design. So you can work with a couple of different tools. You can either work with a dotting tool, an orange wood stick that has a point on the end, or if you have just a regular toothpick, you can use a toothpick. Personally, I'm going to use our dotting tool. So when you're doing your dot daisies or your flowers, you're going to start in a triangular pattern. So we're going to start with 1 dot right at the top surface, and then we're going to create a triangle. So we're going to create 2 little dots at the bottom, and then we're going to fill in on the sides. So this way you're going to get a nice even application of those dots all the way in a circle. Sometimes if I were to start at the top and just work in a circle, a lot of times what happens is I'll start there and I'll work around and I won't get my placement proper, or I won't get it where I want it. And then I either end up with too many dots or it ends up a little bit lopsided. So when you're doing your dots, always start with your triangle. So start with that first dot, that second dot, and then that 3rd dot to create that triangle, and then you're going to connect those other 2 in the center. So we're going to start by just picking up a little bit of our Mission Control gel paint, and again this is Fizz, this is our white gel paint. So we're going to start with our top dot. So we're going to start there. I'm going to just press that straight down, lift straight up. You want to make sure that you're not really coming in at an angle, because sometimes that can make your dot more of an oval shape. So make sure that you're coming in straight. I'm going to pick up more paint. So every time I add a dot, I do pick up a little bit more paint so that I have the same size dot as that previous one. Same thing, I'll pick up a little bit more, create my triangle, pick up another dot onto those sides. So it's just that easy. I think I'm going to make these just a little bit larger, just adding a little bit more of that paint in there. So however you want to create your daisies, however you want to create those dots, if you want them a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, you can create a little bit more of that paint on there. Now again, if you want to just leave those dots like that, you can leave them like that, or you can pull them into the center. So what I like to do is with my micro detailer, I'll pick a center point. So just put a little tiny dot right in the center, and that's going to be my center point. So I'm going to pull each of those dots right into the center with that micro detailer. Now this is going to help to create a little bit more of a petal look rather than just a dot look. And same thing, I'm going to start with my triangle. I start with that top dot, pull into the center, turn my hand around, and then I'm going to pull those 2 bottom dots into the center. So that's going to start as your kind of your outline, and then you're going to bring those other 2 last little ones right into the center. And just drawing a tiny little line right in and connecting the dots. Now at this point, if you feel like you want to move on to your next one, you can, but usually what I like to do is I will take my Touch Cure Light and I will freeze these into place. So I'm just going to set these into place for probably about 10 to 20 seconds or so, just so that if I do accidentally bump these when I'm working on my next flower, I won't dent them or smudge them or anything like that. So we have our flower. Let's go ahead and add some leaves to our design. And we're going to be using Mission Control Clash. So this is a really fun bright green. And we're going to use the same technique of those dots. So again, taking a little bit of that gel paint. When I place my leaves, I put them right in between the petals So we're gonna set one down right there. And I think we're gonna set one down maybe right over here on the side. I think I'll pick up a little bit more of that gel paint. Now again, you could do these one at a time, or you can do them both at the same time, whatever works for you, however fast you're working. If you are more of a beginner and you work a little bit slower, go ahead and work one at a time. That's okay. Now, just like we did our petals, we're gonna pull that dot right in towards the center. So we're gonna move inward. But then to actually make it look more like a leaf, we're also gonna pull away from our flower. So just pulling away. So now we have points on both ends of our leaf. Same thing on this other one, pull in towards the center, turn my hand around, and pull away from the center. So now we have our two little leaves on the sides. Again, I'm gonna cure this into place for another few seconds, and then we'll work on our second one. Okay, once you've set that into place, you can go ahead and do your top coat. And for this design, I like to use the Ultimate Finish top coat. This is a little bit of a thicker top coat, so it's gonna start to level out over those little flowers, and it's not gonna leave a textured surface. So I'm gonna cure this one for a full 60 seconds. So our nail is cured out. Now there is one detail that I did forget to add in here, but if you don't want to add this detail, you don't have to. You can leave your flowers just as they are, but before you do your top coat, you could add one last little dot right in the center, just for a little bit of brightness, just for an added accent. Again, we'll cure that into place. Now this one, you could even add this over the top. You could add this on the surface just like we did here, or you could have added that underneath your top coat. Whichever you like better, go ahead and do that. Okay, so our nail is fully cured out, and we do have that shiny top coat from the Ultimate Finish, and now we have that one little accent in our design, and that is also cured out. We don't have to cleanse anything off or wipe off any tacky surface. So let's move on to our second design. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 more coats of our Aquamarine 101 on this, and then I'll come back and we'll start the design. So at this point, I've got 2 coats of our Aquamarine 101, our gel polish on there, and I've applied 1 coat of our matte non-tack top coat. Now, we're going to be doing a 3D design, and I'm going to be working first off with my Speed White acrylic, and I'm going to be using an acrylic brush. Now, my personal choice when I do my 3D designs is our Artistic Sculptor. This one does come to a really perfect point at the end. We've got our acrylic size 4. That's a nice small brush. We also have our Master Gel brush. Now, I know this isn't technically an acrylic brush, but if you get a brand new one of these, you can use it with your acrylic. I would not use one that you've already used with your gel, but it's a personal preference which brush you use. So when we're doing 3D with acrylic, I'm going to have my brush nice and saturated with my liquid. I am going to wipe out the excess, and then I'm going to roll that brush on my towel. I'm barely going to touch the surface of that powder, and then I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to drain out the extra. Now you see it, I've got my towel folded over, so this way I can drain out the liquid from my brush, but my pearl isn't going to stick to my table towel. If I were to drain my brush on the table towel, a lot of times you're going to lose your pearl on the towel. So again, I'm going to drain out my liquid, roll my brush to a point, drain out some of that extra, pick up my small pearl, and you guys, it's tiny, 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 tiny. So drain out the extra. We're going to set that down, so I'm going to drop that onto the nail. I'm going to roll my brush back to a point to make sure that it stays in that point, and again draining out a little extra liquid. I'm going to give it just a little bit of a dab, and what this is going to do, this is going to round out that pearl a little bit, and then I'm going to pull that into that center point. So just like we did on our other nails, pull that into your center point. I'm going to wipe out my brush so that I get a little bit more of a wedge, and I'm going to use the edge of my brush, if I need to tuck in that point. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Wipe out our brush, drain out the liquid, bring it to a point, touch straight in. Pick up that tiny little pearl, drain out that liquid. We're going to create that triangle. So again, the bottom point, set it down, press out that pearl, roll my brush back to a point, drag that in to the center point. Again, if I need to, bring it to a wedge, tuck in on those edges, create more of that teardrop shape. Okay. Roll my brush back to a point, pick up my pearl, drain out the liquid, set that down, again creating that triangle. Tap it down, get it to just soften a little bit, round out a little bit more, roll my brush to a point, use that point to bring that into the center. Drain out my liquid, roll to a point, pick up my pearl, drain out the liquid, and now we're just going to fill in those little sides. Set it down, tap out, get it to soften a little bit, roll my brush to a point, and pull into the center. So it's actually similar techniques as what we were doing on our first nail. It's just using a different medium. And acrylic is a little bit harder to control than a gel paint is, so that's why this design is geared a little bit more towards that pro or somebody that may have a little bit more experience with acrylic. Okay, so we've got all of our pearls set into place. We're going to do our second design down at the bottom. So let's go ahead and add our leaves. And I'm going to be working with one of our slick pour colors, and this is one of our technically a dip powder, but it is an ultra fine acrylic powder. Now this one is based on a white acrylic powder, and then it has the color pigment added to it. So I'm going to pick up a pearl and show you guys really quick. So with this one, you're going to notice that a little bit of that white acrylic shows through, and then you have a little bit more of that green around the edges. I really like that when I'm doing my leaves because I like that different color. Now, if you want to make sure that you don't have that extra color, if you pick up that pearl, instead of just setting it flat onto the nail, turn your brush so that pearl is on the upside, and then set that down. Now you can see that as I work with that, I see more of the green, less of that two-tone. However you want your leaves to look, you can work with that color. Personally, I do like to have that little bit of color variation and have a little bit of that white. So just know that you can do either design. So just like we picked up our other pearls, I'm going to pick that one up, drain out, and let's start with this one right down here. Same thing, I'm going to tap that down, get it to round out a little bit. I'm going to use the point of my brush to pull away, and then again roll that back into place and pull in towards the center. Now you guys, here's the thing. If you don't like how your pearl is looking, at this point I could actually wipe this off and remove it and start again. So you don't have to worry too much. If you have something that's not perfect, you can remove that and try again. Once it sets, then you have to kind of work with it and live with it, but you could have taken that pearl off and redone it if you needed to. So we're going to take another pearl, same thing, drain out the liquid, and let's bring this one right up top here. Tap that down, round it out a little bit, roll my brush to a point, pull that into the center, and again, just like we did with our gel paints, we're pulling to the center and then pulling away. Use the edge of my brush, tuck in if I need to, crisp up that edge, and we'll pull that just a little bit more. Now as you're working, especially with the leaves, as your product is setting, you can add a little bit more texture to it. You can add a little bit of depth down the center of that leaf, adding just a little bit more, however you want to create your designs. Okay, I think I like that. Now, before I forget like I did on my first nail, we're going to add one more little dot right in the center, and this is another one of our slick pour powders, but this one has a little bit of glitter in it. Same thing, we're going to pick up that same kind of pearl, just a teeny tiny one, drain out that extra liquid, and we're going to set that right down in the center. Give that a little tap down, let it round out a little bit, and I think we're good. one last one right in the center. All right, I think I'm liking that. Now, at this point, you've got that matte top coat on there. You could actually leave it as a matte finish and have that final look as a matte, or you can use your ultimate finish. Now, again, a couple of options. You could do your top coat over the whole entire thing once those two little dots have set. You could do your top coat over the whole thing to give it a complete shiny look, or you could also add a top coat around your design. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a little bit of my ultimate finish top coat onto my tile, and this is just our little ceramic art palette. So putting a little bit on there. I'm going to use my brush to top coat the areas that I can without touching our actual design, because I do want to leave my design matte just to have a little bit of that definition. So I'm going to top coat right around everything, and then I'm going to grab either my liner brush or my micro detailer, and then we're just going to top coat right around. Now again, if you wanted top coat, if you wanted the flowers to look nice and shiny, you could just apply your top coat over the whole nail. But I'm just going to use my micro detailer brush to get that top coat just on the aquamarine color, not over the surface of my flowers. Just making sure to get in between all of those little petals, right around our leaves, anywhere you want that shiny finish. Okay, I'm just going to take a quick look here, make sure I top coated all of the areas that I want to. We'll get this into our light for a full 60-second cure, and we'll finish up our nail. All right, so we have our two designs here, and whether you're a beginner or a pro, there's no wrong way to create flowers.